Hello and welcome to the state of Kentucky for Friday. I'm Bruce Maples, publisher of Forward Kentucky, and we're really glad to have you with us today. We have an interesting show. We're going to talk a little bit about the endorsements that Indivisible made, the multiple endorsements that Indivisible made in the Senate race. And then we hope to be able to talk to Dr. Stephen Stack, who is the commissioner of the Department of Public Health. As you know, we're in the middle of this sort of bifurcated world where we have the COVID-19 crisis going on. So it seems like every week we talk about that to some extent. And then we also have the election and, the general political world that's still going on as well. So we're going to try and touch both of those today. I want to start, though, by reminding you of a couple of things. Let me put these banners up here. If you are not a member of Forward Kentucky, our paying members are what support our work. And so it's really easy to become a paying member, and it's fairly cheap, frankly. You go to forwardky.com/join, and there are 3 levels of membership: basic, supporting, and sustaining. And each one of them has different perks. Our paying members pay the bills. And so if you are enjoying our work and you appreciate the work we do, please consider becoming a member. I also want to point out, if you are watching on Facebook or YouTube live, if you comment on Facebook or YouTube, we can see those comments, and sometimes we share them in the show, especially if they're a question for the guest. So if you're watching that way, feel free to comment, and always glad to have thumbs up and likes and stuff like that. But if you want to comment, we're glad to have those as well. And finally, just for what it's worth, we are starting to do advertising and sponsorships through our work. We really are looking for nonprofit organizations, activist organizations, and political campaigns. And so you can do a commercial during this show. You can put an ad on our website. You can get a promo in our newsletter. It's all explained on that page. So go to forwardky.com/sponsor to learn more about that. So I'm going to take this banner down around myself and take that off. So let's talk a little bit about the crisis that we're in and how that works. Multiple polls have revealed that what people want from their political leaders, their elected leaders, is transparency, and then they want to see them rely on expertise and experts. I think it's pretty obvious that Governor Beshear has been transparent throughout this whole thing. He's been vulnerable when it was called for. He's been straight up with the facts. He has yielded the floor to other experts, to talk about things. And that's one of the reasons that he has such a high level of trust across the state. Another of the reasons, though, is that he has really good experts. And one of those experts is Dr. Stephen Stack, who's the commissioner of the Department for Public Health. Dr. Stack has been at the podium numerous times, has done videos and interviews. I have to say that when I went and looked at his resume, I was very impressed. He's not just a political appointee. He has a lot of experience in medicine, particularly emergency medicine. And the thing that I thought was really striking was he was the youngest president of the American Medical Association board in over 150 years. So Dr. Stephen Stack, we are fortunate to have him at our state. So we want to welcome him into our show. Dr. Stack, welcome to the state of Kentucky.
Hi, Bruce. How are you doing today?
I'm good. As I said, I was looking at your resume and very impressed by it, but I noticed one honor you were missing, and that was that you don't have your own bobblehead.
Not yet.
So I actually wrote the bobblehead people 2 days ago and suggested you for a bobblehead. I haven't heard back, but if I do, I'll let you know.
Thank you.
You might speak up just a little bit. I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Can you hear me better?
Yeah, that's much better. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know that your time is valuable, so we don't want to take too much time talking about bobbleheads. Let's talk about some things. One of the things that has been talked about a lot in some of the media is Veterans Affairs facilities, VA facilities across the country, and how they're doing with PPE and so on and so forth. Do you have line of sight into the VA facility in Louisville? And if you do, how are they doing?
No, I don't really have a line of sight into those facilities. So the VA facilities, the federal prisons would be a similar category. Those are federal agencies, and it's not unlike Vatican City in the middle of Rome. So it's like a country unto itself with its own jurisdiction. So we try to collaborate with the federal agencies. I think in a number of instances, we're able to collaborate successfully. Our local health departments, in this case, when you talk about the Louisville VA, would be Louisville Metro Health Department, work with them. But ultimately, the federal government has complete jurisdiction over those areas, and I don't have direct authority over them as a health commissioner in Kentucky.
And so if you call them up and ask them questions, they really don't have to answer.
Yeah, if they choose not to. And so I think we're very grateful that for the most part, people do cooperate with us. We're all in this together, and we want the same goals. We want to keep people safe and healthy and well. But no, ultimately, their compliance or participation with us is voluntary since they operate under the jurisdiction of the federal government.
Sure. Another concern spot across the country, of course, is meatpacking facilities and other industrial facilities, but especially meatpacking. We have a number of those in Kentucky. How are they doing? And does your department or does anybody actually go in and inspect them?
Right. So the meatpacking facilities have gotten attention recently, but I would say that it really is any environment where people are close together, right? So it's meatpacking facilities, warehouses, manufacturing facilities, and also in a non-work related environment, it's long-term care facilities, correctional institutes, behavioral health hospitals. So all of those are instances where people come together and work in close proximity and where that increases the risk of exposure to this infection. So we've been very clear that the steps we've taken about having social distancing greater than 6 feet, wearing masks, having enhanced hygiene personally, and also surface cleaning, those are so essential in order to minimize the spread of infection. And so in this case, those plants and factories face additional challenges because people work very close to each other. We do work with the employers throughout the state, and overwhelmingly, they work with us in good faith, and they try to comply to help keep their employees safe. Local health departments play an enormous role in this, in that they go into those factories and plants and facilities and try to help advise them, but also the Kentucky Department for Public Health plays an important role. And so I've been on a number of calls myself with leaders from different types of employers, including the meat processing industry, trying to work with the local health department leader, the state health experts, and finding solutions to reduce the risk of disease transmission. So we track a lot of facilities on a regular basis when they have positive cases. And right now, I can report as of yesterday, we don't have anyone shut down at our request. That is the end point in the process if we can't contain infection. But I would say so far we've had very good success working with the employers in the state.
I was struck by the fact that on one national show, they reported that OSHA has not issued any citations at all to anybody during this pandemic, which I found shocking. Do we go into the plants and inspect them, and do we issue citations if needed?
Well, if needed. So our local health departments, we have inspectors across the state, and they work usually through the local health departments, although we have some directly employed at the state level as well. And they go into these factories and plants and do a site inspection. And then obviously we work in a consultative way. When necessary, we do have regulatory authority and can take steps. And so earlier in this process, we had a warehouse that we requested shut down for a period of time, and they did. And they did a deep cleaning, and they changed, re-engineered their processes. We've had other instances where a complete shutdown was not necessary, and they were able to re-engineer, do the cleaning that was necessary, and take steps to reduce the risk of infection. So I would say that punitive approach is there if necessary, but I think that ultimately is undesirable, because if we've gotten to that point, it means we've not cooperated as fully as we needed to. So I think we work to try to be supportive while also making the very clear expectation that this is not optional, that there's a public health need for these employers to work with us to keep their employees and the general public safe.
Let's ask about ICU beds for just a minute.
Sure.
I'm sort of a stats geek, and so when somebody puts out numbers, I'm wanting to hear the numbers underneath the numbers. Okay. So when you talk about the state, I'm assuming that you or your department has a count of how many ICU beds there are in total across the state. So I'm wondering how many there are and what was the peak use of them during this pandemic.
Right. So every state's required to report to the federal government on a daily basis the number of active hospital beds and ICU beds that are in operation, and also the occupancy for COVID-19 patients. Some of these statistics I have readily available in my head because I review them often enough, and others I'd have to go online and look them up. But I can tell you, as of last night, we have operating approximately 1,800 ICU beds in the state of Kentucky. It's approximate, but it's close to that, of which we had, I think, about 700 were occupied with patients. Those are not all coronavirus patients. Those are patients there for a variety of reasons. I don't know off the top of my head the peak occupancy for the ICUs during this epidemic, but remember, we took very dramatic steps to clear out the hospitals, as did many states, to try to prepare it for the potential surge of coronavirus patients. And so at no point in the state of Kentucky have we exceeded our need for ICU beds, and every patient who's needed an ICU bed for coronavirus or any other condition has had access to them. So I know we've never even scraped the ceiling for that capacity. It's been over 50% during the coronavirus, but I don't think it's ever exceeded 75% occupancy.
Wow, that's good to know, because as I'm sure you know, there are other parts of the country where ICU beds are once again at a premium. So I'm glad to know that we're in good shape.
Well, and I would emphasize, I just add to this, that this is one of the reasons we have to be very careful and remember where we started this journey. And the governor showed this last night at his press conference. We were seeing doubling every few days of the number of cases, which was the base of the epidemic curve. And had we not interrupted that curve, we very well could have been multiple times beyond our capacity in the state of Kentucky, right, which would have then had cascading collapses of the healthcare system and even more people who would have suffered adverse consequences because we didn't have capacity to treat them. So we have benefited from the participation of Kentuckians across the state. We're grateful for that, because that is what has helped us thus far to avoid an incredible loss of human life.
I want to ask you about something more on a national level and how it affects you. There have been multiple reports that the CDC at the national level has been sidelined or even just put on the shelf. They're not doing their daily briefings anymore. You don't hear from the director, so on and so forth. And there's also been some reports that some of their guidelines are somewhat wishy-washy compared to the way they've been in the past. I'm not going to ask you to comment on the national scene because that would not be fair, but I'm wondering where you sit as a commissioner of public health for a state. What difference, if any, have you seen in what you get from the CDC?
Well, so the CDC has long been a well-respected and even at times revered institution in our country. It really is the preeminent institute globally for infectious diseases. And we have received and continue to receive wonderful support from the CDC. There's the online documents that they produce, which are really good expert written opinion pieces and evidence-based documents guiding how we intervene in this pandemic. They've also provided career CDC professionals who have come out to the states, including Kentucky, to supplement and augment our capacities. They have been sent out into the field here in Kentucky to do community-based assessments and go into nursing homes and other settings. So we have been and continue to be very appreciative of what the CDC does. As far as the guidance they produce, I would say more generally, I have personally, and I think the team that I have the privilege to serve with here, always critically assess the materials that we use, whether it's from the CDC or any other source. And so there have been the occasional times where we have chosen to have a slightly different approach or standard than the CDC. It's not a criticism of the work that they're doing. It's just that we all have an obligation and responsibility in our own states to make informed decisions based on what we recommend is the best public health policy for the people for whom we're responsible. So I'm very grateful for the resources the CDC provides. As far as their public-facing appearance to the public at large, that's probably better for others to comment on. I certainly hope that in partnership with Governor Beshear and the state of Kentucky, people have come to have some confidence in our attempt to be transparent, candid, and evidence-based in our information that we share with the public, and also in the directions policy-wise that we recommend.
Thank you. So I have two final questions. The first one is there anything I didn't ask you that you wish I had asked you?
No, I think you've got the important stuff. I would want to emphasize for the public, I have tried to be, I hope I've succeeded more often than not, to be balanced about this crisis we face. It is a public health emergency. We have seen what happens when this disease goes unchecked in places. In China, they locked down an entire province. It would be locking down an entire section of the United States would be the equivalent. In northern Italy, they had their health system strained to the very capacity and beyond. And in New York City, right here in our own country, we have had a staggering loss of human life and hospitals running at capacity and field hospitals set up in Central Park. So this is not an imaginary threat. This is a real threat, and we have seen horrible consequences, including the loss of over 100,000 Americans in just a few months. This is enormous. It has also been a financial and economic catastrophe at the same time. And that is a consequence of the coronavirus. And if you look around the world, regardless of the form of government nationally, and regardless of the ideologies of the governments of the states across our own country, leaders in a position of responsibility and information have made very similar decisions the world around. The coronavirus has brought about enormous and devastating economic consequences, but it is the consequence of the coronavirus and the need to spare losing the lives, literally, of millions of Americans in this country. And so I thank everyone for paying attention to the things we try to share, for understanding that we're all in this together and that it's together that we're going to achieve the best possible outcome. But now is a time, as I said a few days ago, for us to be patient and tolerant and kind with each other, because the strains people are feeling are substantial, and it's going to take all of us being attentive to and supportive of each other to help get through this crisis as best we're able to.
Before I ask my last question, we have one comment from, actually a couple of comments. Let me share this one from Jason Cooper. Thanks to you and to your team. And then Joni Prentice, same thing. I would say that universally when I talk to people, there is thankfulness for both you and Governor Beshear and the leadership you've provided. When I worked in the corporate world, we would do Ask Me Anythings with leaders, even the CEO. And one of the questions that I always like to end with is the one I'm going to ask you. In the midst of all of this, what keeps you up at night?
Well, I worry that because this is an invisible threat, and because I'm sitting in my office here, I'm looking out at the beautiful grassy knoll that's in front of my office and the trees. It's beautiful. Because people are inherently social, we like being around each other, we enjoy each other's company. It is natural for us to want to enjoy each other's personal presence. I worry that it can lull us into complacency and we underestimate the real danger we still face. Until we get a vaccine or until we get a treatment that eliminates or neutralizes the threat of this disease, we know that more than 95% of the people in Kentucky have not yet been infected by this. And if we allow the disease to spread unchecked, we could still have thousands, even tens of thousands of people die if it spreads unchecked. We have taken steps that we have clearly been successful. As a state, we have excelled. It's nice not to be at the bottom of the public health pile for a change. I mean, we have a lot of public health stats that are not good and that need a lot of work and a lot of effort that has to be done to advance health equity and to improve vaccination status and cancer screenings and reduce the opioid epidemic. We have a lot of serious challenges. Unfortunately, we are typically in the bottom of the pile among the states for our performance. This is one time that Team Kentucky is at the top of the pile for good reasons. We have one of the best epidemic curves, meaning we prevented the greatest harms in loss of human life. We have had a community that has come together, the public, the healthcare providers, the business community. People have come together. And I just want to say that it is important that people not become complacent and think that the threat is not still out there. And I think this is a real danger in the summer. I will tell you, though, I continue to get handwritten notes for people saying thank you for the work that we're doing. I continue to get tokens of their appreciation in their notes, which are also appreciated. We can see that with the governor's mugs that change from day to day, the number of people who have given him different mugs to show on the stand. I'm very, very grateful for that. And I want to continue to inspire people to do the right thing and to be kind and considerate to each other. If you're not going to wear a mask, I wish you would. It's a simple act that can keep others safe. But I would ask at minimum that they're respectful of the people who do wear a mask. And for people who do wear a mask, I would urge them not to make it a matter of conflict about criticizing others who don't. You can still keep yourself safe by steering a wider path around the folks who choose not to follow the guidance. We still have to care for each other and be tolerant of each other, even if we disagree. And I think we can pull this off together. And like the governor says, we'll get through this together. And I really do believe that's the way we get out of this better than we might otherwise.
Excellent. Dr. Stephen Stack, Commissioner of the Department for Public Health. As our viewers have said, we are thankful that you are here. We're thankful that you're the expert that the governor can rely on, and we appreciate your leadership. Stay safe, and we'll keep wearing our mask.
Thank you. You too, Bruce. I hope you have a nice weekend.
You too.
Thanks.
Dr. Stephen Stack, we really appreciate him taking the time to be with us. He's a very busy man with a lot on his plate, and it was very gracious of him and his staff to work out a time for him to come speak with us. And of course, this will be viewed later, not only live, but people can watch it later on as well. I want to remind people of a couple of things real quickly. First of all, we are taking sponsorships now. So if you are interested in helping to sponsor the work, go to this page, forwardky.com sponsor, to learn how to do that. And if you want to support the work as a member, go to forwardky.com/join. All right, now we're going to move into a whole different topic, which is endorsements. We have a page on our site where we try to keep track of endorsements. And if you've been following the race for the Senate, you know that Amy McGrath, Mike Breuer, and Charles Booker are all running for the Senate nomination to take on Mitch McConnell in the fall. They've all gotten endorsements. But if you're following it, you may have been confused a few weeks ago when you saw that Indivisible endorsed Mike Breuer, and you may have said to yourself, wait a minute, I thought Indivisible endorsed Booker. What is this about? And then there was some discussion about National Indivisible and what are they going to do? Well, we reached out to Indivisible and they said, here's the person you need to speak with. And so we're going to bring on Harry Neack, who is an activist, and I'll let him tell you more about himself. Let me put his name up here so everybody can see. Harry, welcome to the state of Kentucky.
Thanks for having me.
So I just really want to ask, first of all, who are you and what's your involvement with the political process and with Indivisible?
First, I'm a stay-at-home dad, but I'm on the Leadership Council for the Bluegrass Activist Alliance, which is one of the chapters of Indivisible within the state.
Okay, Bluegrass Activist Alliance, which is one of the Indivisible chapters, even though they go by Bluegrass Activist Alliance.
Yeah, it was Indivisible Bluegrass originally back in 2017, but it merged with another group just because we had a lot of common membership.
Right.
So we are one large in that group in the area, so in the Bluegrass area.
Okay. So you're involved with that one group, and that right there names part of the problem, which is I think a lot of people don't realize there are multiple indivisible groups.
Yes.
You want to explain that?
Yes. When Indivisible started, different chapters sprung up around the state, just like they did around the country. And they took on their own names. They weren't necessarily just named for the area that they were in. So there were some, like in Berea or the 4th District, which is still active, or in Louisville, where they had Indivisible Kentucky, which was the name then would suggest that it was the Indivisible for the whole state, but it was just their group. So we've got several active groups across the state now.
Okay. Yeah, I think that was one of the early confusions was Indivisible Kentucky is not the Indivisible chapter for Kentucky. Their original website, if I remember correctly, was Indivisible KYO3, which helped lay it out a little bit. They're from the 3rd Congressional District. So we have all these different groups. So what's the process for endorsement? How did that happen?
Endorsement was in 2019. Everybody agreed that if there was going to be a statewide endorsement, there had to be agreement among all of the chapters. There had to be a single consensus on one candidate. So every chapter went through its own process of engaging its members, trying to see if there was a unanimous choice amongst its members. And then if there was, then the chapters went ahead and made their endorsements. So there are a number of different endorsements, some for Boyer, some for Booker, but without a consensus in the state, there was no single endorsement.
Can you lay out which groups endorsed whom and which ones didn't do anybody?
Yes, if you'll, I'm sorry, I should read from a list here that I have in front of me. So just because I don't have it off the top of my head. 4 of the groups endorsed, and one thing beforehand, 3 groups did not actually endorse. We engaged in the process of endorsement discussions, but remained neutral, including the group that I'm part of, Bluegrass Activist Alliance. Of the 4, or of the 5 that did endorse, we've got 4 that endorsed from Mike Breuer, and those were Indivisible Kentucky, based in Louisville, Penroyal Indivisible in Hopkinsville, Indivisible NK4 in Northern Kentucky, and Indivisible SEKY in Breathitt County, and the Indivisible Danville group endorsed Booker. And those are the 5 endorsements right now.
Okay, so Indivisible Danville endorsed Booker.
Yes.
Indivisible Kentucky, which is really Louisville, Indivisible Northern Kentucky, Indivisible Southeast, and BGAA, which is Indivisible sort of Lexington, Frankfort, that sort of area, all endorsed Breuer.
We did not. BGAA endorsed, or we were not endorsing in the primary. It was, Breuer was in Indivisible Kentucky, Penroyal, and Hopkins. Yeah.
That's the one I was missing. Okay, yeah. So we have 4 indivisible groups that endorsed Mike Breuer, 1 that endorsed Booker, and 3 that didn't endorse.
Yes.
Okay, so therefore, there's not consensus, so there wasn't a state-level endorsement, correct?
Yep, and there was a lot of discussion. We had a lot of spirited phone calls over about a month, I'd say, at least a month recently, and there still was no consensus. It was, it's hard. There are a lot of different, points in terms of each candidate's favor.
And so since the groups in the state did not agree on a candidate to endorse, the national did not endorse either.
That's true. So in order to get the national endorsement, the state had to have consensus in order to do that. And national worked with us. Their representatives in the region and at the top level all worked with us. And eventually we could not arrive at that consensus, and they could not give us an endorsement then.
Is there any, you may not want to share this, but is there a reason that Danville decided to go with Booker and not with Breuer? Did they give a reason for that?
No, and well, they may have, but I can't speak to that. And don't really want to talk for them.
Okay. I think it's interesting also that none of the groups endorsed McGrath. Was there a discussion of that as well?
There was. The thing that happened was that groups had to submit endorsements or candidates that they wanted to endorse to the national group. There was support in other groups who did not who did not endorse for McGrath and for the other candidates, where she, I believe, got substantial support in a couple of them, but those groups just happened not to decide to endorse
Publicly.
Yes.
Okay. So now that this has happened and you've got various groups endorsing various people, is there any further discussion, or is there a feeling of what are we going to do next, or what?
It really seems to be, it seems to look like the individual groups are going to work for or on behalf of the candidates that they supported and endorsed. There didn't seem to be like there might be a consensus or a teamwork between the Breuer groups, but I'm not sure about that since I'm not part of their official leadership.
Okay.
Maybe some collaborative work.
Okay, one last question. I was involved pretty heavily in the last election, and there was discussion about Bernie Sanders group versus Hillary Clinton group, and which got not only animated but sometimes vitriolic, as you may be aware. And after it was over, there was some wondering about whether the Bernie Sanders supporters would actually work hard for Hillary once she won the nomination. Do you have any sense that there's that going on, or do you think that these groups are all going to go, well, we have three candidates, whoever it is, we're going to work for?
I think the ultimate goal is to get Mitch McConnell out of office, and I do believe that everybody will come together in the end. And no matter who you support in the primary, day afterwards, I think that everybody will be back in action to go after Mitch McConnell and support the eventual nominee.
You mentioned before we got on the air that you've done a lot of campaign organizing and worked on a lot of campaigns and done activist work. I realize you're not traveling the state and talking to everybody, but what sense do you have of the level of energy across the groups that you do know about?
I think there's a lot of energy. I think the people are, the state of things right now, and especially with coronavirus going on and Mitch McConnell sort of having his hand in the relief bills. And I think that there's a lot of sense of people frustrated but animated, ready to get him out of office. And I know that my group is very active. They are lots of energy behind people. And I think that we're just ready to go again. 2018, we did a whole lot of work, and we did a whole lot of good work across the country and across the state. And I think that it's going to be the same level of intensity this time.
Excellent. Harry Neack, thank you so much for bringing us the information. Thank you for your hard work on behalf of campaigns. And let's hope that we find more work for you to do in Kentucky, and let's hope we can change the direction and get some more progressive people in there.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being on. Whoops, take you out there. Well, folks, we've heard from Dr. Stack and from Harry Neack, and that's our show for this week. I want to remind you again that we value your viewership. If you like this show, please share it with others. Invite them to watch as well. Remember, you can watch it later on YouTube or on Facebook or on forwardky.com. It'll be posted by this evening, and you can watch the entire show there as well. Once again, we want to thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next week.